Hi everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Is this working? I think so. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming. It's a big honor to speak here at the big CARE event, one of my favorite events. So today, like my friend here said, I will talk about why feminists should fight for animals. And this is a talk that I usually give to feminists, feminist circles. I've done this so far in Poland. And I hope to encourage you to do the same in your countries, which is why I'm giving this talk. So I will start with an introduction. And then I will proceed to the talk that I always give to feminists, which consists of an introduction, also some interconnections that I see between the two movements, and a summary. And then I will proceed to some further ways of involving feminists in the movement, because giving the talk is only one of the elements. And I will speak about some lessons that I learned while doing this. And I will end with a take-home message. So a few words about me. I'm the Corporate Relations Director in Fundacja Alberta Schweitzera. It's an office of the Albert Schweitzer Foundation in Poland. And I lead a team of dedicated women who have convinced almost 30 big companies to go cage-free for laying hens within the first year of our startup. I'm also a member of the Women's Congress, which is the biggest social movement in Poland. And I've initiated the Animal Center there. So it's a feminist social movement. And in general, I've been involved in both the animal and the feminist movements for most of my life, my adult life. And that's why I'm talking about this topic today. And the reason why I'm giving this talk is that I really strongly believe that the animal movement needs all the allies it can get, and that bringing more people into this movement is crucial. And this is just one of the strategies of doing this, is bringing more people from other movements into it, people who are already activists in other areas, who can bring their expertise, their knowledge, their connections to our movement to help animals. And this presentation will show some of the tactics I have used to involve feminists in Poland in the struggle for animal rights. And by showing some of the arguments that I have used, I have managed to convince some prominent feminists and also some regular feminist activists to join the fight for animals. And like I said, I hopefully will inspire you to do the same in your countries with either feminists or other movements. So this is a talk I always give to feminists, and I ask them, why should feminists fight for animal rights? And why is it in the very best interest of women to have better animal protection laws and for society to respect animals? Also, what are the common motives in women's struggles in society and in the plight of animals? And how is our position similar in society? And also, what connects our two movements? So, I believe that our movements are deeply connected, that they depend on one another actually, not only because we're guided by the same values that I will talk about later, but also because we share a common burden with animals. We have the same enemy, which I believe is patriarchy, and most of all, we have the same goal, which is ultimately freedom from suffering, is dignity and respect for all. Therefore, solidarity between our movements is absolutely necessary for both of us to win our causes. I will talk about 4 interconnections between the animal movement and the feminist movement. Of course, these can be grouped in many ways. I've chosen to group it into 4 areas to make it easier. One of them, the first area, is objectification. The second, violence. The third is language, which connects these two, objectification and violence. And fourth, finally, it is inconvenience. So, to begin with, objectification. It is always those who are stronger who take away the subjectivity of those who are weaker. And the very fact that they are weaker is an excuse to use them. So in society in general, men objectify women in public space, and people objectify animals and treat them as things. It is mainly bodies which are objectified. So as you can often see, women are portrayed as sexual objects in society. This is very much visible in advertisements where female bodies can advertise almost anything you can imagine. And I'm sure you've seen female body parts being shown up close, as if the women they belong to aren't human, but just those body parts. I will show you some examples in a moment. And also women, in these cases, are first of all a body and only human afterwards. They are judged by their looks, whether or not they are mothers, whether they are in an age that is still attractive for men. And also historically, this was also about how useful we were as cooks, as childbearers, as cleaners, and so on. And also this includes women as props, as hostesses, and the sexualized images of women in music videos, for instance. So here are some examples. The first commercial actually means she knows what will be in her mouth in a second. And this is a commercial of an energy drink in Poland. And the good news is that these people had to pay a fine for the commercial they made, but usually this is not the case. Usually it is the case of commercials like these where nobody cares about this much or nothing happens, there are no consequences for portraying women as sexualized objects, actually. Some more examples here. You may know some of these. Some of these are international commercials. Beer, cars. And here, can she make you lose control? This is a commercial of a deodorant. But what I find most shocking is the commercial right here. It's actually a social ad, which should mean that people will be more sensitive. These people want to encourage others to be donors of organs. And what they say here is becoming a donor is probably your only chance of getting inside her. Some more cars, suits. You've probably seen many commercials like this before. So here, vodka. And this is actually a meat shop, believe it or not. So sometimes it is combined, selling animal products and the female body. So some other parallels of objectification. I always say to feminists, when they look at all these images of commercials, they are bewildered. They know about this, of course, but they don't think about animals in the same way. And what I say to them is that very analogically, animals are treated like things by humans in society. And they can be consumed, they can be used for entertainment of every kind, they can be worn, they can be used in painful experiments in circuses, SeaWorlds. And ironically, they also appear in commercials, but usually as kind of happy chickens, happy cows, happy pigs, who only dream of being eaten, or who are giving up their own eggs and milk for humans, and they want to do this, of course. So, in essence, both women and animals live in systems of violence in which their bodies serve somebody else. Even if it's only symbolically in such commercials, I will show you later how symbolically it can lead to actual violence. And I really believe that by allowing any group or any species to be objectified, we actually agree to the process of objectification itself. So even if we finally have full equality of women and men in society and we end the objectification of women, I believe that if we continue objectification towards animals, sooner or later this will come back inevitably, either towards women or towards another group, because we agree to the process itself of objectification in society. So now some examples of animals and commercials about animals. And when I speak to feminists, I ask them, is this really not the same? Here are animals which are brought down to body parts, just like females are brought down to their body parts in other commercials. And here, this one is quite shocking on the left, where a pig is actually killing herself to be eaten by us. Here, we'd like you to milk us for all we're worth. And happy cows who are encouraging people to drink their milk. So, in essence, the process of objectification is when we deny somebody's ability to think, to feel, and to need. And therefore, women are often viewed as being closer to animals in many societies, or more like animals than like men and humans, therefore. So we are, in many cultures, denied rationality. We are said to be guided by hormones or by emotions. We are biologized in a sense, so we're full of instincts, for instance, the maternal instinct. And we are thought of, therefore, as being worse leaders or incapable of taking on important roles, not having mathematical IT talents, or even being bad drivers. But of course, we can always, man up or grow a pair, then we'll be fine. And some other parallels. These are about animals, actually, and this is the analogy I want to show you. So society denies that animals have social needs, that they have intelligence, that they have empathy, that they are sentient beings. Usually we say that animals can feel pain, and this is the most that we are able to allow them. But they are actually much, much more, and they have more complicated needs than what we usually say about them. So the treatment of both women and animals show how hierarchical a society we live in. And the hierarchy that I see here is at the top men, later women and children, and at the very bottom animals. And I want to show you some examples of advertisements which actually manage to offend both women and animals at the same time. So here's girl power, here's protecting nutritional values from the sun, and up there, this is actually a chicken slaughterhouse in Poland. This is what their website looks like. So they thought this would encourage people to buy chicken meat, I guess. And we all wish that commercials would look more like this. The parts they neglect to mention, conscious, sentient beings. Okay, the next interconnection I want to tell you about is language. And I consider this a bit of a bridge between objectification I just told you about and violence that I will talk about afterwards. So the first step in justifying violence is to objectify someone, to take away their dignity and rights. Like I showed you before in these commercials, for instance, because it then becomes okay, in a way, to hurt them. Because when someone is a thing, or someone is always less than, then how can you actually hurt them? You can't hurt things. And I believe that oppressive language towards women and animals is an inevitable element of our patriarchal society. It's connected. Both women as sexual objects and animals as things that you can use. Both are products, actually, that serve somebody else, and animals even more so than women. And our language has a very funny way of belittling harm done to both women and animals. So I show feminists some examples of phrases. You probably have your own phrases in your own languages. I know a few in Polish anyways. Here are some English ones. So when a woman is harassed, she can often hear, you know, boys will be boys. It's only a compliment, and don't be so dramatic. He's basically a good guy, and it's just what men do. Or even to victims of rape, what was she wearing that night? Or she was asking for it. I'm sure you have some other examples in your language that you can talk about later. So, analogically, animals, humane killing. Now, this is not the same kind of oppressive language that we use towards women. Can any killing be humane? And what about species regulation that hunters often use? Or, for instance, calling animals, dead animals, meat, fur, or counting them in kilos or tons instead of as individuals. This is objectifying them as well. And when I point this out to feminists, they see the obvious connection here, how we belittle the harm done to both women and to animals. And language also often uses offensive animal names, most oftentimes towards women. In many languages, a woman can be called a cow, a bitch, a pig. Of course, these are used towards men sometimes as well, but if you observe a few languages, it's mainly towards women. In Poland, we have this offensive saying, a house hen or a home hen, which is a way of saying that a woman stays at home and takes care of children and doesn't mean anything in society. So some other offensive animal qualities and activities include barking, yapping, being bitchy, and of course any vulgar words and expressions that you can imagine. And like I said, they're used mainly towards women. So the big question is, why are animal qualities offensive in the first place? Kind of like feminine qualities are offensive. And contempt towards women and animals goes hand in hand, as you can see here. But here's a nice example of actually using language to our advantage. In Poland, Polish feminists from the women's strike used this image and used the offensive Polish expression house hen or home hen that I just told you about to encourage women to come to a big protest and sign a petition. So the third interconnection I want to tell you about, which is connected by language to objectification, is violence. So research has really strongly shown by now that domestic violence towards women and animals and children is strongly connected to violence towards animals. And I don't have time to go into the details of each of the pieces of research, but I will just name a few of them. So the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals has proven that animal abusers are 5 times more likely to commit violent crimes against people, not only domestic violence. The American Psychiatric Association uses animal cruelty as one of the diagnostic criteria of conduct disorder. And Dr. Frank Acione proved in 1995 that 71% of women, battered women in the shelters that he researched, said that their abuser had either harmed or threatened to harm their domestic animal companion. Actually, FBI profilers also use animal abuse as one of the most important criteria and indicators of violent behavior towards humans in the future. Another piece of research has shown that slaughterhouse employment increases the total amount of arrests for violent crimes, for rape, and for other sex offenses in comparison with other industries. And finally, by the Massachusetts Society again, 70% of people who committed violent crimes against animals have also committed violent crimes, other violent crimes against people usually. So the important element of this is that it is very, very difficult, especially in Poland, but I'm sure it's like this in other countries as well, for victims of violence to find help. For instance, women, they're often ashamed of what happened to them. They don't actually go to court with what happened, or they feel that nobody will believe them. And animals obviously cannot even file a lawsuit, so they need a person to do this for them. And oftentimes this is actually women. When I've spoken to lawyers who bring these lawsuits for animals, it's always done by women, which is probably not a coincidence. In Poland, both when violence towards women and towards animals is actually brought to the attention of the judicial system, it's most often dismissed, either because of a lack of evidence or because it's considered a petty crime and not important enough. So this is very interesting, and research has proven that as part of their violence towards their wives or partners, men threat to hurt domestic animals that they love. So it's a kind of way of hurting them another way psychologically. And many shelters for women don't accept animals. So this leads to large numbers of women staying at home with their offender in order to protect their companion animals, because they're afraid they will get killed or hurt by their partner. So in essence, violence is universal because it's caused by the perpetrator's sense of power over their weaker victim. And the mechanisms of violence are always the same, no matter who the victim is. So in order to end violence towards women, this is what I say to feminists, we have to end all kinds of violence, also towards animals, because it's all interconnected, like I said. This is a bit more controversial, I suppose, but please bear with me. Another element of violence, violence is gendered in society when it comes to humans. But if you take a closer look at factory farming, you'll see that female animals are also treated slightly differently because of their sex. They have to go through different kinds of tortures. And some of these include forced insemination. And when I speak to more radical crowds of feminists, I mention that this actually adds to the rape culture that they are fighting. So forced insemination is part of the rape culture that they are so against, that we are so against. Another one of the tortures includes continuous pregnancy, never-ending pregnancy in a way, which leads to severe health problems. And of course, taking away babies without consideration for the mother's pain. If you look at cows, you'll see this clearly. So therefore, female animals are objectified on an even greater scale because they're not just consumed, but they're also used as incubators, as producers. And they live a life of torture in disastrous conditions and ultimately end up on humans' plates anyways. So this includes cows in milking, laying hens in cages, or pigs in crates. And this is absolutely not to say that male animals, that their suffering is less important. I'm just pointing to the fact that it's different for female animals. And that here violence is also gendered in a sense. So finally, my last interconnection that I want to mention is inconvenience. It is very inconvenient for men to acknowledge the full equality of women. Because if they did, this would mean fewer privileges and more obligations for them. This could mean things like equal pay, parity in parliaments, absolutely no tolerance for harassment, high penalties and inevitable penalties for violence, and true equality at home, so even more chores. And analogically, I point this out to feminists when I speak to them, is it not the same with animals? If we had to accept as humans that animals are not just capable of feeling pain, but so much more, that they're full subjective beings, that they have their own complicated emotions, needs, internal life, social life, so on, would we not have to change what we consume, what we do for entertainment, what we wear? It would not be very convenient for us, for society as a whole. So when I speak about inconvenience, I don't mean that ending objectification of animals is inconvenient just for the animal products industry. and for the lobby, but also for regular people. Just like it is not convenient for men to have full equality of women in society. Even those men who claim they're feminists, still when you observe them in closer life, it seems that full equality is complicated, is difficult, and the same goes for animals. So to sum up this part, the talk I give to feminists, the aim of both of our movements is to minimize suffering, to provide dignity for everybody who deserves it and who has been deprived of it in society. So it's not just the position that we have in society and the guiding values that connect us, but everything that we endure, we as women and animals. It's interconnected. So it's objectification, language, violence, and inconvenience. And we all depend on one another. When I speak to feminists, I say, as your fellow feminists, I really urge you to join the animal rights movement in the name of solidarity, but also in our best interest, because we need good animal protection laws. We need a better society for animals to have a better society for women. And since here I'm speaking to a different crowd of vegan activists, I also urge you to take a closer look at the feminist movement. We have a lot in common, actually. So that was the talk that I give to feminist audiences in Poland so far. You can use my arguments whenever you like and use them as your own and talk to feminists in your countries if you're also in the feminist circle. But there are many other ways of involving feminists. And some of the things that we've done, that I've done in Poland, includes an animal center at the Women's Congress that I will tell you about in a second in more detail, a ministry for animals in the shadow cabinet of this Women's Congress, involving the huge women's strike in animal rights protests as well, and inviting feminists to speak at animal events, engaging them to share their enthusiasm, and most of all, maybe not most of all, but also engaging prominent feminists and feminist celebrities as faces of the movement in certain projects. So here's an example of the Animal Center at the Women's Congress. The Women's Congress is the biggest social movement in Poland. It has many, many events, but one huge event once a year that it's famous for. And it has up to 5,000 attendees each year and consists of debates, lectures, and workshops grouped into 15 to 20 centers. Some of these include women in politics, health, equal pay, her story media, and even a green center, which has in the past spoken about animals from time to time, but only as a side note and as domestic animals only. So there has never been any place for farmed animals at the Women's Congress until this year, when we managed to introduce the Animal Center. And it was the first Animal Center at the Women's Congress. This is the logo. And here's the artist who did the logo in the front row, Aleksandra Świeża. And this center included 4 debates. The first one was pretty much the talk I just gave to you, but it involved 4 important activists and a celebrity writer. We spoke about why feminists should fight for animals. The second one was about stopping hunters, because we have groups of people in Poland who actually go to the forest and stand in front of hunters to disable the hunting procedures, and it's mainly women. The third one was about women who fight with fur farms and other farms, actually, in very small towns in Poland. And the fourth one was a kind of step-by-step guide, more of a workshop for feminists on how to make their very first steps in better consumer decisions for animals. So you can see the pictures here with the crowds, but at first, actually, for the first debate, 2 minutes before it started, there were only like 5 people in the room, so we were kind of terrified that there is absolutely no interest of feminists in this animal topic. But 2 minutes after it started, more or less, the crowd started pouring in, and we couldn't fit them into the room. There was a large queue into the room, so we were very, very heartened by this. It exceeded expectations, and in the end, it was one of the largest audiences of all the centers that year. So it turns out that feminists are really ready for this topic, and it's worth using this to our advantage, to the advantage of animals. So the Animal Center will continue for the years to come, and if you have any women's congresses or anything similar in your countries, I encourage you to try to introduce these topics as well. I want to tell you about some lessons learned if you wish to do things like this in your country. What I have learned, this is my experience, is not to ask for everything at once, because the previous year I actually asked for an animal center at the Women's Congress, and it seemed so exotic to them that they said that it sounds a bit crazy and we probably won't do this. So instead what we did was I just appeared on stage during one of the debates about some ecofeminism issues and spoke about animals there. It was a kind of experiment to see how people would react, and they liked it, so only the next year the director of the Women's Congress agreed to have an animal center. So don't ask for everything at once, but do ask, and ask bravely. Even if it seems exotic to some circles, you may be surprised at their reactions. I think it's worth trying, and it worked here, so it should work for you too. It's worth finding a prominent person within the movement, for instance, within the feminist movement, who really cares about our cause and who can open doors for you. For me, this was the director of the Women's Congress, who wasn't too eager 2 years ago, but when I spoke to her, I met with her a few times and spoke about the issue. She does care about animals. I had to open her eyes to farmed animals because she cared about domestic animals only, but that has changed. And now, knowing her better and knowing that she cares about the cause, it's easier to fight for other things, like a ministry of animals in the Women's Congress, which will probably happen soon. And my take-home message for you is, if you're a fellow feminist and animal lover, use these arguments to persuade your feminist circle to participate in the animal rights movement, and vice versa, of course. And connect to other movements as well. I think there are many human rights movements which are very similar too, where you can find similarities and the same values as the animal rights movement, and encourage those activists to come into our movement as well. Because animals need all the help they can get, all the allies they can get. And research has shown, I think this is very important, that activists in one field are much more likely to become activists in another field as well and combine this. And we need their expertise, we need their experience, their connections to help our movement grow. So like I said, find similarities and common goals to finally end factory farming, to get more support. So to end cruelty against animals, but also patriarchy. And I would like to end with one of my favorite quotes by one of my favorite authors. To talk about veganism is to threaten the pillars of patriarchy. Carol Adams. So thank you very much. And
thank you for a great speech. Now I feel embarrassed that I never thought about the connection between the animal rights movement and feminism movement.
No need to feel embarrassed, just use it.
Yeah, I'll do my best. And if there are any questions, I need to pass the mic because of the record. So, do you have any? Okay.
Hi, Karolina. My name's Jaya Bamitra. I'm here representing Animal Equality. Thank you so much for what I thought was an absolutely brilliant presentation. I thought your arguments were very, very well laid out, and the connection's so interesting and very powerful. I think your topic is fascinating, the way that it was framed, how we can encourage feminists to consider animal rights. And you noted at the end, vice versa. And I'm sure you're aware we've had quite a Me Too moment in the United States in the animal advocacy community as well. It's one that I've been a part of. And I think that the challenge we've been having in the United States is that not enough people who care about animal rights actually care about feminism. So it's the reverse. And one challenge that we're having now that I don't know there is a solution for, but I would love your take on, is the fact that a lot of the people who have been outed for bad behavior in the movement, who earlier this year, February and March were the key months when this was unfolding, who we felt that there was some progress being made where they were moved out of the movement, creating a safer environment for the people working within it, are now popping back up. And they're popping back up in different forms, and they still have quite a lot of strength. There are still donors supporting them. There are still other prominent figures at organizations who are allied with them. That makes it, again, an unsafe environment to do the work, and also very discouraging for those of us who came out against those people. So I don't know if you have any impressions based on your advocacy in Europe on this issue, but would love to hear your take on maybe how we can address that.
Sure. Of course, I don't know the exact details of the situation, but I've been watching closely what's going on in the US, and I think we have a huge problem with sexism in the animal rights movement. We're a very small movement, I'd say, in a way. I mean, a lot of us know each other from different countries, and there's a large amount of women here and a smaller amount of men. And I think we're like, in a nutshell, we see what's going on in society within our own movement, where we have many women working for animals, but mainly men at the very top. And I think it's a huge problem. What I'm trying to do in my own work, in my own organization, is to hire women a lot, to promote women a lot wherever I can, and to encourage women to step up and to take on more obligations that they're maybe afraid to take on. When they're completely ready, they have everything they need, all the experience they need. I think what we can do as women is probably support other women and very strongly connect with each other. I think we have to be allies to each other, support each other as much as possible. But I think we should also educate men within the movement. I don't have a ready solution for what's going on in the States. It's very disturbing to me that these people are popping back up and going back in, and that even some women support them, despite of what happened. I think a lot of education, internal education is needed, and I'm trying to bring a lot of feminism into the movement, but I think if we all did that, it could be better, and if we were really like sisters to each other, as in the feminist movement, but also within the animal rights movement, and always spoke up for each other and believed the victims most of all when things happen, it would be easier. But I don't have any easy solutions how to change it. It's a long process, I think.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'd like to second that this was really a fantastic talk, and the parallels drawn were something I haven't seen before. I had two quick questions. First, can I use your slides? Will they be available?
Of course. Just pop me your email and I will send it to you.
Thanks. Second question, have you tried extending this to the anti-racist movement as well, which has a lot of parallels with the feminist movement?
I haven't so far, but I would really encourage it. I'm part of the LGBTQ movement also, so I try to do it there. But so far, it's been a bit of an experiment during the last year and a half, doing it towards feminists, and I hope to expand this.
Any other questions? Okay.
Hello, and thank you for the talk. I would like to ask, what would you say to someone who would told you that it's not okay to say that this forceful insemination of cows is a rape, this word, rape, because the main evil of rape for women is mainly psychological than physical. Like the consequences are like humiliation and low self-esteem and self-hatred and shame, embarrassment, and these are not probably the feelings the cow has, like self-esteem, self-hatred, or embarrassment in the society. So what would you say, that it's not like rape, it's still bad, but the word rape, if it's the same?
Yeah, like I said, it's quite controversial, so I'm careful with these words, depending on the crowd that I speak to, because I think the effect is what matters, and I want to bring feminists inside the movement. So if for certain crowds this would be controversial, I don't use the word. But like I said, it's not, I didn't use the word rape, actually, but rape culture, because I think that forced insemination adds to the rape culture for humans also, because it's the way that we treat females, the way that we use them as in a kind of incubator, in a sense. I think it's a parallel between animals and women. I think it's, quite recently I saw an advertisement actually about women dancing in a barn with cows, and this was about milking actually. I wish I had it here, but there's a video. I will send it to those who are interested. I think it adds to the rape culture. But using the word rape, it is sensitive, I think, and I'm still not, I haven't made up my mind about it, whether it's the right word to use. I think it may offend some women, but to others this actually speaks very well and shows them that they are hurt in many other ways. And I do believe that cows have psychological problems also. Maybe it's not self-hatred, and maybe it's not what you mentioned here, but I'm sure that they don't only feel physical pain, but much, much more.
Hi, I'm Paul from Obraz. Thank you very much for a very inspirational speech. You mentioned one topic which is a smaller one than your main topic, but it's also very interesting for me, and it's the reaching out to other NGOs such as human rights NGOs. Do you know if there's any kind of like organized outreach towards them, or some examples of this kind of connection? Thank you.
Not really, actually. I believe maybe Jaya can say more about this in the US. Maybe there's some connections there because you have lots of offers to write about this topic. It's not a new topic, really. It's just pretty new in Europe. No, I haven't seen any organized action of this sort. I've kind of been doing it individually and as our small foundation in Poland. But I hope this will change. And now it may be easier if we've done this with the Women's Congress. Perhaps other movements will be open to it in Poland. I know that some people in Berlin want to connect the feminist movement also. There's a big congress there. They want to have some animal rights issues there as well. So hopefully in the future, yeah.
Anyone? Okay, so if that's all, thank you once again.
Thank you very much for coming.